welcome today to our webinar on mastering change management in your S4HANA transformations. I'm Tyler Watts, Sales Director at Blue Wave Select, and for anybody who doesn't already know us, we're the UK's highest rated SAP recruitment company, the co-creators of this platform, SAP Network Plus, and we're one of the only agencies to be partnered directly with SAP. We hold a 99% rating on Trustpilot, and if you do want to look into us further, you can find a link within the chat. But the real reason I'm sure you'll be here with us today is because of our guest and friend of Blue Wave, Dennis Supp.
Great to be here with you, Tyler. Thank you for having me, and a big thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I'm also hearing from everyone in the audience as well. So
great to have you with us, Dennis. I'm probably going to embarrass you a little now, but by way of introduction, Dennis is a Harvard certified strategist in change and transformation. I believe has over 20 years of commercial experience covering hands-on program transformation and change leadership. I would say this experience comes blended across global systems implementation, change, process optimization, and operations. His expertise in stakeholder engagement and leading cross-functional collaboration in fast-paced, complex environments has allowed him to really drive strategic outcomes for organizations of all sizes, from PE-backed companies to large FTSEs across multiple sectors. And I think it's fair to say with a very clear ideology of why change is so important in transformation and a history of impacting SAP transformation time and time again. Dennis is the perfect person to fill the spot for today's webinar. I'd say before we jump into it, I should let you know that the session will run for approximately 30 minutes, which will be a task for Dennis and I, because we have the ability to go for ages, but we will keep it to 30 minutes, and the session will be recorded. So if you do want to kind of catch up afterwards, it will be available for playback on Network Plus. We'll get through as much as we can this afternoon, but if you would see value in taking some individual time with Dennis outside of the webinar, please do reach out to us, because Dennis is kindly offering a free 1-hour consulting session to anybody who wants it, to give more tailored advice and lessons learned, which can be specific to your own challenges or upcoming transformations. I believe my email should be in the chat, so drop me an email if you want to, and I can happily facilitate an introduction. But without further ado, I think let's jump into the topic of change and managing resistance. So I guess a great place for us to start is with a question that we're often asked by clients: what is more important, project management or change management? And some feel that if a project is well executed, the change will follow naturally, whilst others argue that change is the real driver of success. What is your perspective, Dennis?
Great question. But before I share my thoughts, I'm actually curious about what our audience thinks. So let's make this a little bit interactive. If you wouldn't mind, so press 1, just push 1 for project management, program management, and press 2 for change management. So I'll just give 10 seconds or so. Curious about this one, because I feel conflicted a little bit. All right. So the reason I'm smiling is because it feels like a trick question almost, Tyler, because project and change management really are essential in their own right, but they serve different purposes, and sometimes people mix that up. So successful transformation, in my mind, happens when you have both project program management and change management complementing each other. So to dive into the sort of detail, project management, be focusing more on preparing the actual solution for the people. Just let that sink, because I've been thinking about that myself and trying to rationalize that. And then change management is focusing more on preparing the people for the solution. And to use an analogy, and I love analogies, we can build the best restaurant in the world, but if no one actually wants to come and dine in it, it's useless. What's the point? It'll just sit there, right? Same with the system, same with a new process, same with a new way of working, right? So people need to have an appetite for change willingly. Otherwise, you risk derailing the change. And worse yet, you can have people leave the organization. So you have talent outgoing with the ways of working and the synergies and the culture, which also impacts the future state of the organization and the mindset of the people that actually leave and join a new organization. It's not just about the current now, it's about the future as well. So it's that simple. And why is it that simple? In my mind, because everything is centered around people, us. So both are equal in my mind, with change slightly more so. And I guess to zoom in on both project management and change management, so we clarify and distinguish between the two areas a little bit more. Project management really would be about ensuring that you're technical, you're logistical. We've all seen Gantt charts, we've all seen program plans, etc. So I won't preach to the choir, but that your resource aspects, etc., are well coordinated and executed within the right scope, time, budget. It really focuses on the solution, which, while I'm on the topic, involves more than just reporting, right? Project management is more than just reporting. It requires working closely with workstream leads, external partners such as system integrators to really align on your SDLC, system development lifecycle, full lifecycle. So your requirements, design, build, so forth, if we're implementing a system change. And having strong project management and having a strong sound approach also proactively identifies and manages the interdependencies and risks before they actually materialize into issues. So you have that seamless execution, right? So yes, there is absolutely 100% clear value add from that perspective, and there's no denying that. But then on the other hand, you have change management, which is really focusing on the people side of the transformation. So it's about ensuring that the organization and its people are ready, are willing, are able actually to adopt the new systems, processes, or ways of working. And it's really about helping people navigate through that uncertainty, fostering the engagement, managing the resistance, both actually active and passive. They can either cause a sort of a positive or a negative domino effect on truly transformational change.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, resistance is natural, right? Resistance is natural. We all experience it when we are faced with what? Uncertainty, when we haven't done something that before. And what does uncertainty do? It breeds fear. Fear of how will this impact me? How will this impact us? Which goes back to our innate survival instincts as human beings, right? Let's not kid ourselves. This is very basic psychology here, right? So it's about removing that fear and reframing the new emotion that's being experienced when faced with a change into a positive one, not a negative one. And this is no different than the uncertainty we feel when traveling, when discovering a new restaurant, wondering, should I order that spaghetti carbonara or should I go for something else, right? So I haven't tasted it, how I'll react. So there is that initial discomfort followed by growth, adaptation, etc., etc. So in essence, to wrap it up, you can't rely solely on project management to drive successful change, because projects often fail when the people side isn't addressed. And conversely, you can't rely on change solely either. So you really need that balanced approach with due investment on the change side that is often overlooked, I would say, given budgetary constraints. And you'll find, and some of our audience as well might find, when organizations confuse or conflate the two, so program management or change management, and feel that one is more important than the other, it often leads to the mistaken belief that a MVP, minimum viable product, of a project manager who might not have the expertise in change management will be sufficient. But in reality, without the human side of change being properly managed, that we
Yep.
just talked about very practically, even the best laid project plan will likely fail. And it won't have that lasting success. So both are required, both are equally important. They need to be integrated either with a hybrid PM, CM,
Yep.
change manager with strong domain knowledge, or separate roles, individuals that really work well together to ensure that transformation is not only delivered, but is sustainable and is fully embraced by the organization. So, I mean, we could keep talking about this all day, but hopefully that gives a
We
flavor.
could, and I think what you say there makes a lot of sense. I knew we would get to analogies, so to get a good one in the first first answer is great. I think following on then, we hear some leaders view change management as a nice to have, right? So something that's useful but not essential to delivering transformation, whereas others may argue it's a fundamental necessity, and ultimately change management, like, is it a nicety or is it a necessity in driving successful transformations in your opinion? And I think actually before you answer, Dennis, I'd like to engage the audience listening again to see where we're at here. So if you're listening and personally you feel that change management is a nicety, then put a 1 in the chat. And if you're in it's a necessity camp, put a 2 in the chat, because it would be interesting to see if there's a consensus here.
Give it a few seconds.
Mm.
So, in my mind, change management is an absolute necessity, not a nicety. You can have the best delivery plan with the right levels of executive sponsorship and investment, usually the 2 levers that initially make or break a
Yeah.
program of works and transformation, right? You need that. That is undeniable. But unless you consider change, you can scrap it all. So transformation, in my mind, isn't just about bottom and top line. Yes,
Yeah.
of course, the outcome will be to optimize, to make things more efficient, effective, having value adding activities and so forth, right? To be ahead of our competition,
Yeah.
ride the wave of transformation in this turbulent world, right? Rather than crash. But at the end of the day, it's about making an impact on each other's lives. So it's not just about installing that executable file. It's about recognizing that it's about people and changing their ways of working, taking perspective curiously with care, which can either disable or further enable people. And guess what? That will further disable or enable us, the executives who are sponsoring this project, right? So it's perspective taking that's very important. Again, another analogy that I would use, I'm using restaurant analogies because it's lunchtime. And thanks for everyone for joining us over lunchtime. But we can have the best Michelin style recipe in the world, right? But it doesn't mean that it will taste the same as that of a world-class restaurant team that's in sync, right? Equally, we can have the best car in the world, build the best car in the world, S4HANA, whatever you want to call it, right? System analogy. But if we crash it, right, it's a rhetorical question here. So change is really about, the way I see it, change is essentially the fuel for the engine and the fuel for the people, fuel for the transformation, etc. So it's not a nicety, it's a necessity. And in my mind, emotion and trust move transformation. That is really the fuel, if I was to verbalize it, that makes or breaks the transformation.
So safe to say you're very clearly a number 2.
I don't mean to be philosophical here, by the way. It's trying to be very practical. All right, okay. I'm just trying to bring practical, beyond the articles that we read. I see a lot of people, clicking like on a McKinsey or a Big Four article or a system integrator article, etc. But let's deep dive with practical examples. So hopefully I'm giving you some of those.
It's fantastic.
Theory is very important, but we need the practical connotation.
You mentioned at the end in your mind, emotion and trust will be critical for moving transformation too. Could you expand on the trust side? You know, kind of when it's one thing to say we need trust, but how do you then build that trust in your opinion?
Sorry, broke up for a second.
Uh,
One thing
no,
to say.
could, so essentially, I was saying, you mentioned the importance of both emotion and trust when it comes to
Yes.
to moving transformation, and you know, I'd agree with that, but to move that statement one step further, how do you go about building trust within a transformation in your opinion?
Great question. I guess to build the trust, let's go back to ourselves, right? So what do we need? We need to really connect the hearts and minds on the why
Mm,
of the change that's happening
right.
to us. Simple as
Yeah.
that. And offer that answer. Obviously, we could go into nth degree detail here now, but to keep it very digestible, given the essence of time. So proactively going to people, which means town halls, one-on-ones, communicating,
Mm,
so that the messages reinforce and amplify each other. And therefore, people will feel more involved, they'll feel more bought in, there will be minimized resistance, rather than feel that the change is being prescribed
yeah.
and imposed upon them, when it needs to feel owned by
Yes.
them, created, co-created by them,
Mm,
right? And in turn, this will help create a psychologically safe environment. So it's also important to understand that everyone has different motivations too. Everyone has different whys. We're all different. So it's important to take, again, what I was talking about earlier, take individual perspective beyond merely executing on checklist-driven assessments. So people, process systems, looking at impacts and all that. Yes, that's all well and good. You know, just as in program management, it's not just about ticking off RAID logs and
yeah.
reporting. So it and to do that, to move beyond that micro tunnel vision, you need to really focus on building the macro environment that will help enable and embed sustained change while removing resistance. So transformations in my mind that don't address the human side of change are likely
Yeah.
to fail,
Yeah.
no matter how successful the actual technical side is. And organizations that neglect the human side of change set themselves up for failure in my mind. Maybe short-term success, but or maybe you haven't maximized your full potential of success, right? But that to me means failure because you could have done better. So
Yeah.
you set yourself up for failure no matter how flawless that technical execution and design is. And that's where I see programs that have been called upon, for example, in the past, where things have been deployed, but they haven't been adopted. People haven't built the awareness. They haven't had the buy-in. Yes, some have, but it's very hard to rally as an individual. So, even the best systems, processes, strategies are worthless if people aren't engaged, aligned, and equipped, enabled to actually adopt them. So we need to remember at the end of the day, everything that we do goes back to us,
Yeah.
people. And with that in mind, change management really ensures that the people of the organization, the heartbeat of the company, understand the reasons for the transformation. They're supported through the journey and they're equipped to adapt and therefore to sustain the new ways of working, because without it, you risk poor adoption, low morale, and project failure. So that's my opinion on that particular question.
Yeah. Yeah. Poor adoption, low morale,
Obviously,
project failure. We don't want any of that, do we? So then, I guess what would you say, in experience, are the most common barriers to driving change, and how do you go about overcoming them?
great question, and we could talk about this all day. A day workshop over a blue wave. Um, uh, But I guess in my mind, the most common barriers I've encountered include obviously resistance to change, your lack of alignment across different departments, particularly if you're looking at an IMO, integration, aggressive acquisitions, etc. Functional silos across different business units, for example, rather than driving that transformation collectively as a team. And that's all driven by different motivations, KPIs, etc. So sometimes when you're doing transformation, you need to step back and think about realigning those KPIs to enable. So you've got the right behaviors and actions that follow in sync. So, and then on top of that, what I've seen and experienced practically is that oftentimes these issues are exacerbated by lack of communication with that misalignment and confusion and a lack of transparency, if you will. So conscious I've been talking a little bit, just, to our audience, feel free to comment in a few words on barriers that you've experienced. I think we've all been around the block several times and we've got the t-shirt, many t-shirts, but I'd love to hear more while I'm talking here. So I guess, to link it all up, in my mind, overcoming these issues involves creating a clear and compelling vision of the future state, maintaining transparent communication, and engaging both leaders and the people on the ground to act as change champions. You can't simply rely on positional power.
Yeah.
All right, so you've got positional, personal, excuse me, and relational power sources.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can't just say this must be done because leadership says so. That only takes us that far. Yes, leadership is very important, but it only takes us to the door, I would say. It doesn't fully open it. People need to walk through it, right? So instead, an effective change and transformation manager should be activating and leveraging the relational and personal power networks. But at the human level, warmth trumps strength when incentivizing change. So it's really about engagement, supporting people through the transition with care rather than imposition.
Yeah.
In my mind. Yeah.
So we need a compelling vision of future state, transparent communication, and change champions as well. At a high level, what do you find are common reasons, if you like, for resisting change at that human level?
Okay. So to dive into, I guess, fundamental human resistors, at a very high level, I would bucket these into two very basic elements. So cognitive and emotional. Cognitive, you've got your fixed ways of working that we've been used to. Let's be practical. Why should we change? It got me bread on the table so far, right? Why? Why should I care? Why should I change? Emotional, to do with insecurities that we experience. So if you make this process so efficient, will it cost me my role? Why should I help you? You've just parachuted in to transform my world, not only at work, but at home. Why? Why should I help you? So obviously it's more involved than that, but to move past these natural resistors, it's really key to ensure that people understand that this is also about helping them remove their own pain points and that they have a say. They have the pen in the change and shaping the change. So these instinctual human survival mechanisms, fight or flight, etc., right, are centered around uncertainty, as I mentioned before. Uncertainty breeds fear. So overcoming these instinctual human survival resistors means removing fear and building awareness.
Yep.
And to do that, my go-to framework that you've heard me talk about is awareness comes first. Without awareness, you don't have buy-in. Without buy-in, you don't have change. And without effective change, you don't get sticky embedment, right? So first, we need to firmly establish awareness of what the issue is that we're trying to address, whether a SAP system, a process change, etc. People must first recognize the issue before they care about the actual solution. Then buy-in. Once you have the awareness actually built, then it's all about securing that agreement that the change is really necessary, not a nicety that we talked about
Yeah.
earlier, right? If people
Yeah.
don't see why it matters, they won't engage.
Yeah.
Then moving to change execution, which really means implementing the change with active involvement and having that established buy-in. And only once we graduate from that and have that effective change, then we can say, hopefully, we'll build sticky embedded change where the transformation team can walk away, knowing that
Yeah.
the Titanic won't crash in that iceberg, right? The organization won't go back to its old ways.
Yeah.
It won't go to gut reflex because the gut reflex has been recalibrated to the new way of working willingly.
Yeah.
Um, so and it's been bought in by everyone. So yes, the business needs to sponsor it, but the people need to own it. The people need to want it. And that comes through building awareness, buy-in, and effectively manage change.
So how do you manage that effectively? What would you say the key considerations there?
Yeah. The area would say communication,
Yeah.
transparency, being consistent on the reasons behind the change, the benefits, engaging in that open dialogue to address concerns, to provide opportunities for people to ask questions openly, to express their opinions. And I will also step above that and say it's also about being consistent in how you come across. It's not just about the words that you actually say, it's how you say them. And I guess secondly, I would say bottom up stakeholder involvement from the beginning, encouraging participation, from decision making and planning, making them feel more invested, less resistant to changes that they've actually helped shape and drive, right? Why would you resist something that you helped pen and design?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. So in turn, this builds coalition, ownership, so that really your change is feeling more shaped rather than forced upon you. Then I would say the right level of education and training. So equipping people with the right skills, knowledge to actually succeed. Yes, they might be fully aware and care, but might not have the actual skills. So timely training sessions, actively listening to concerns that people raise and making them a priority, analyzing root causes to issues, tailoring solutions to mitigate these concerns, right? This will reduce that uncertainty and that fear. It will
Yeah.
give people the know-how and confidence to drive that car
Yeah.
and that new way forward, right? And then we talked about change champion networks. So identifying individuals that have those personal and relational power networks
Yeah.
to help rally the change from within. And hopefully all of these combined should inspire people to act
Yeah.
with passion and purpose. So, and when you connect those two, you'll create that natural sense of urgency, coalition, vision, in line with, for example, Kotter's framework, to throw a theory in here. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it does, and actually there's quite a bit more discussion that I think I want to get through. I'm looking at the time, and we're fast approaching 30 minutes. So just for everyone in the audience, if you do need to jump out at past, just to I guess say again, the recording will be available to watch back if you have to jump out and kind of miss the back end of this. But I guess I don't want to wrap it up too quickly when there's a bit more to get through. So if you want to stick around and kind of listen to more of this beyond the half an hour mark, then feel free. If not, drop back within the next 24 hours, because the full webinar will be available for download. But kind of moving on from what you were saying there, Dennis, I guess it's fair to say also that some organizations focus heavily on structure and process when driving transformation, right? But that they can overlook culture. Do you think culture is a major factor in change, or is it just an excuse for resistance?
I would say culture is a critical factor. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's a nice wrap up. It's critical in the success or failure. It can either determining the success or failure of change initiatives. So, change isn't just about implementing a new process, a system, or structure. We talked about that. It's about people. Guess what? People are shaped by culture. Teams are defined by their mission and their in-group culture. And when you add something new into that ecosystem, there is a natural resistance, there is a natural assessment, if you will, and either acceptance actually or resistance. So you might go both ways, right?
Yeah.
And resistance often, in my mind, doesn't come from the change itself, but from cultural misalignment, as I talked about earlier. And when you have change that clashes with the culture,
Yeah.
with the norms, and the ways of working that people are used to, that's when you have issues that arise. And to navigate this,
Yeah.
to keep it simple, I would say assess the culture early, understand what behaviors are, it goes back to KPIs as well, because it's all interlinked. So understand what behaviors are rewarded, whether the organization is naturally adaptable or resistant. How do you do that? Look at prior projects, look at changes, look at successes, look at challenges, look at you know, lessons learned. Who led them?
Yeah.
They could be a change champion now, right?
Yeah.
Engage people as well. That's another important thing, and address those concerns, because people at the end of the day need to see and feel how the change will help them in their actual day-to-day work, not just how it benefits the organization. And then to another point that you also mentioned earlier, you know, it's about leveraging the cultural influences in the organization. And that's where your change champions should be the people that really embody the culture
Yeah.
and hold the trust
Yeah.
in the organization. And therefore, you know, reinforcing that change through culture with aligned behaviors, rewarding efforts, ensuring that the messaging is consistent with the existing values to make the change feel more natural.
Yeah.
You know, to keep it practical, an example of misaligned behaviors could be, you know, employees resisting SAP
Yeah.
because they're used to spreadsheets and they don't see the value in changing, or leaders still requesting the you know, the manual report type 8.1, reinforcing old behaviors.
Yeah.
So messaging and training is also very important here, to really highlight how the change will benefit the people, reducing workload, improving accuracy, etc., rather than just focusing on compliance. And
Yeah.
training really needs to happen during the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, or any process change, with due time and attention. Often, I found that the real learning happens when the system is finally being used in anger.
Yeah.
So you don't have a choice. So in my mind, culture, you know, it isn't really a backdrop to change. It's the very foundation that determines whether the change will succeed or fail. And if we align with the culture, it's adopted. If we ignore it, it's resisted.
Yeah. Brilliant. So culture is key ultimately. I think I would like to finish with one final question, then, which sparks some interesting debate on our side. In your opinion, Dennis, is SAP transformation truly a business-driven initiative, or just an IT-led project in disguise, so to speak?
Okay. So ideally, the technology transformation, SAP, or any other, I would say in this instance, the SAP transformation should be a business-driven initiative, not just IT-led.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, SAP is a tool. Let's be clear. It's the tool. It's not the objective. The true goal should be business transformation,
Yeah.
right? Organizational transformation. So optimizing processes, improving your decision making, driving your efficiency as a result, just like integration between two organizations.
Yeah.
Just like if you're building an annex to your house, an extension. So to keep it practical. So if SAP is implemented with a purely IT-led focus, you risk creating a technically sound system that fails to meet the real business needs, right?
Yeah.
Success, in my mind, uh, uh, really comes from aligning IT expertise and capabilities with the business strategy. And the key here is to ensure that the system, that the technology empowers the organization to meet its objectives, rather than the business adapting to rigid system constraints. That's why you need to do your requirements and accordingly. Really handhold the SI, partner with the workstream leads, lead with care, with change mentality, non-prescriptively, taking perspective. It's a it's a dynamic approach that's required. And how do we actually ensure that business-wide ownership? You engage stakeholders early. You do that often. You
Yeah.
define your transformation goals beyond the system implementation.
Yeah.
And then you prioritize process optimization, user adoption, etc. Not just technical wave rollouts, one
Yeah.
by one by one. So in my mind, the bottom line is that a SAP transformation is a business change that's enabled by technology. It's not just an IT project. And without business ownership, you end up with a system in place, but no real transformation. You have that restaurant, but
Yeah.
no one's going to dine in it. They'll go back to the old habits.
Yeah. I think a really important kind of point to close out on that we should be looking at these transformations as business led and not necessarily IT led. So firmly, I guess, of the opinion that SAP transformation is a business led transformation whereby technology then enables that positive change. And I'm sure this will resonate with many of the guys listening in the audience today. I think for now, that I guess brings us to the end of today's topic. Like we said, we could go for another 30 minutes, but we're already over time. So thanks, Dennis. It's been as great as always to talk on the subject. Thanks everyone in the audience as well for joining in. I hope there's been some useful content for everyone to take away today. A quick reminder also that you can reach out to me if you would like to set up a further discussion with Dennis about your own challenges or transformation issues and questions. And also a reminder that today's recording will be available for playback in the next 24 hours on SAP Network Plus as well. So please feel free to share with anybody who may find this content useful. Finally, any questions that have been posed in the chat, we've taken note of them, and I'm sure Dennis will endeavour to come back to you on these as quickly as possible. But for now, thanks again, Dennis. Wishing everybody in the audience a wonderful day, and I say goodbye for now.
Thank you. I love the interaction on the chat as well. So thanks everyone for chipping in. Great to learn from you too.
Great stuff.
Thanks, Tyler.
See you soon.